Leo Tolstoy had everything most people chase their entire lives: wealth, recognition, a loving family, and a literary legacy that had already secured his place in history. His masterpieces, War and Peace and Anna Karenina, were celebrated by intellectuals and common readers alike. Yet, at the peak of his success, an agonizing question took hold of him, one that threatened to unravel his very existence. This was not a fleeting philosophical musing, but an existential crisis that consumed him. Every morning, he awoke with dread, haunted by the realization that no matter how much he achieved or how deeply he loved, death would erase it all. He likened life to a traveler lost in a forest, desperately clinging to a fragile branch while an inevitable beast, death, lurked below. His success had not brought him peace. It had only deepened the void within him. How could a man who had everything feel like he had nothing? What was the point of his achievements if, in the grand scheme of things, they were destined to disappear? But this was not just Tolstoy's torment. It is a fear that lingers in the minds of countless individuals who reach their goals only to feel more lost than before. Determined to find meaning, Tolstoy turned to philosophy, science, and logic. He studied great thinkers, Schopenhauer, Kant, and the existentialists, hoping they would offer him direction. But the deeper he delved, the greater his despair grew. Philosophy dissected life, debated morality, and analyzed existence, but it failed to provide a satisfying answer. Science was even more ruthless, reducing life to a mere accident biology, governed by cold, indifferent laws of nature. Instead of alleviating his suffering, reason only amplified his agony. If everything ended in death, if every love, every triumph, every moment of joy would be wiped away by time, then what purpose was there? Tolstoy saw only two logical responses to this bleak realization. Either accept that life was meaningless and resign himself to despair, or end his own life to escape the unbearable absurdity of existence. The latter thought consumed him. He admitted in a confession that he had to hide ropes and avoid carrying a gun, fearing he might act on his suicidal impulses. And yet, despite his despair, he clung to life. Something deep inside him refused to accept that meaning was just an illusion. In his search, Tolstoy began to observe those he had long overlooked: the common people, the farmers, laborers, and peasants who live without wealth, fame, or intellectual pursuits. By all rational measures, they should have been more despairing than he was. They had no grand achievements, no lasting legacy, and yet they lived with a quiet contentment, embracing both struggles and joys with a sense of purpose that had eluded him. Unlike the intellectual elite, these people did not seek meaning through abstract reasoning or philosophical speculation. They lived their meaning. They found it in their families, in their traditions, in their connection to the land and to each other. They did not ask whether life had meaning. They simply lived as if it did. Tolstoy was struck by a profound realization. These people did not need the kind of certainty he had been desperately chasing. They embraced mystery. They accepted suffering. And most importantly, they did not fear death the way he did. Their faith, whether in God, tradition, or the natural rhythm of life, gave them a sense of purpose that he, despite all his knowledge and success, had never truly experienced. For years, Tolstoy had sought answers in places where they could never be found. He had believed that meaning had to be a logically provable concept, something that could be written in a book or explained by a philosopher. But now, he realized that meaning was not an intellectual construct. It was a lived experience. At first glance, Tolstoy's life was a portrait of fulfillment. He had wealth, fame, and literary influence. Yet, the more he attained, the more hollow it felt. He compared his life to a man chasing a mirage, believing he was about to reach an oasis, only to find sand slipping through his fingers. His achievements, his books, his legacy, none of it answered the question that haunted him. Why does any of this matter if death will erase it all? The illusion that success would bring meaning shattered before his eyes. His accomplishments were like castles built on the shore, beautiful, yet destined to be washed away by time. Tolstoy's crisis was not unique. He saw the same quiet despair in his fellow writers, noblemen, and intellectuals. Many masked their emptiness with indulgence or distraction, yet beneath their polished exteriors, they too were lost. Some had even stopped searching, accepting their emptiness as a natural state of life. But Tolstoy refused to believe that life was just an elaborate performance, that distraction or despair were the only options. If wealth, fame, and intellectual pursuit had failed him, then meaning had to exist somewhere else. Tolstoy began immersing himself in the lives of ordinary people. He saw that their peace was not rooted in material success or intellectual superiority, but in their ability to surrender to life rather than resist it. They embraced something greater than themselves: faith, love, duty, and in doing so, they were freed from the existential torment that had nearly destroyed him. He realized that the real illusion was not meaninglessness, but the belief that meaning had to be absolute, eternal, and logically irrefutable. Life, he discovered, does not need to be justified by reason alone. It can be justified by love, by connection, by the simple act of living fully. This marked the beginning of a profound shift in Tolstoy's philosophy, one that would lead him to renounce his former values and seek a deeper, more authentic way of living. But his journey was far from over. The next question was inevitable. And so, Tolstoy ventured deeper into the unknown, searching for an answer that could finally bring him the peace he had spent a lifetime chasing. The peasants, the laborers, the ordinary people who lived far removed from the grandeur of aristocratic life. These were individuals without formal education, without wealth, and without the luxury of deep existential contemplation. And yet, they carried within them a peace that even the most enlightened scholars failed to attain. They were not plagued by the same doubts that tormented the intellectual elite. They worked, they loved, they suffered, they aged, yet they did not agonize over the meaning of their existence as Tolstoy did. This contrast deeply unsettled him. How could those with the least knowledge of philosophy seem to possess the greatest understanding of life? What allowed them to rise each morning without the crushing weight of existential dread? What did they understand that he did not? At first, Tolstoy assumed their simplicity was a form of ignorance, that they refrained from questioning life only because they lacked the intellectual tools to do so. But the more he observed them, the more he realized their peace did not stem from a lack of awareness, but from a wisdom far greater than anything found in books. Tolstoy began immersing himself in their world. He spent time with farmers who toiled from dawn until dusk, with craftsmen who shaped raw materials into something useful, with mothers who nurtured generations through love and sacrifice. These people lived by an unspoken philosophy, one not written in text but expressed in the rhythm of their daily lives. They did not struggle with abstract questions of purpose because their lives were inherently meaningful. A farmer did not ponder whether life had significance. He simply tended to his fields. A mother did not question the reality of love. She simply embraced her child. A craftsman did not debate whether his work was important. He simply created. Their wisdom was not theoretical, but experiential. While the intellectual class debated the meaning of existence, these people lived it. They found purpose not in complex ideologies, but in the natural cycles of life, the changing of the seasons, the birth of a child, the passing down of traditions. Their philosophy was not articulated in words, but manifested in action. There was another aspect of their lives that fascinated Tolstoy: their faith. Almost without exception, these simple people believed in something greater than themselves. Whether it was Christianity, folk traditions, or an innate trust in the order of the universe, they lived with a profound sense of connection to the divine. They did not see themselves as isolated individuals struggling to create meaning out of nothing. They saw themselves as part of something vast, woven into the very fabric of existence. For years, Tolstoy had dismissed religion as a collection of outdated myths, useful only for those who could not bear the harsh realities of life. But now he saw it differently. These people did not use faith as an escape. They used it as an anchor. Their belief in God, in moral duty, in the sacredness of life, gave them a strength that no philosophy ever had. They did not fear death as he did, because they saw life as part of something eternal. Their faith was not built on theological arguments or intellectual reasoning. It was not something they had arrived at through logic. It was simply lived. To them, belief was not an intellectual choice, but as natural as breathing. They did not struggle to define meaning, because they embodied it. Tolstoy found himself profoundly moved by this realization. Could it be that the very thing he had spent years rejecting was the key to the peace he had been desperately searching for? This discovery marked a turning point in Tolstoy's life. He had always believed that true understanding could only come through rigorous intellectual pursuit, through logic and reason. But now, he saw another form of knowledge, one that could not be analyzed, only experienced. These simple people had shown him a truth he had long overlooked. That meaning is not something to be solved like a puzzle, but something that emerges when one surrenders to life rather than attempting to control it. Meaning is not found in endless questioning, but in living with purpose, love, and faith. Tolstoy's crisis had pushed him to the edge of despair, but in the lives of those he had once overlooked, he found something unexpected: hope. Not the fleeting kind that comes from distractions or intellectual justifications, but a steady, enduring hope, the kind that allows people to wake up each morning and move forward, even in the face of suffering. He began to see that the answer to life's meaning was not hidden in complex theories or intellectual debates. It was not something to be discovered at all. It had always been there, waiting to be seen. His revelation was simple yet profound. The meaning of life is not found in thought, but in experience. Not in the mind, but in the heart. Not in the pursuit of personal greatness, but in connection with others, with the world, and with something beyond oneself. The philosophers and intellectuals of his time had tried to construct meaning through logic, but logic alone had failed him. The simple people, the peasants, the laborers, had shown him something deeper. Their lives were not driven by ambition, but by duty, love, and faith. They did not analyze meaning. They lived it. And in doing so, they possessed a peace that had always eluded him. Tolstoy realized he had been searching for something that could never be grasped by thought alone. Meaning was not a problem to be solved. It was a reality to be lived. And as he embraced this idea, the despair that had once consumed him began to fade. With this revelation, Tolstoy underwent a profound transformation. He abandoned the belief that individual achievement could bring lasting fulfillment. He no longer saw himself as an isolated being trying to create meaning from nothing. Instead, he recognized himself as part of a greater whole, woven into the fabric of existence itself. He began to view life not as a quest for personal success, but as an opportunity to serve, to love, and to contribute to something beyond himself. He turned away from the empty pursuits that had once defined his world. The hunger for recognition, the desire for a legacy, the obsession with intellectual superiority. None of these things could provide the deep, unshakable sense of meaning he had found in the simplest aspects of life. He wrote about his transformation in A Confession, a book that laid bare his existential crisis and the journey that led him out of it. He described how he had once believed that meaning had to be created by the individual, only to realize it had always existed. It was simply a matter of seeing it. Life, he concluded, was not an intellectual riddle to be solved. It was an act of surrender. Tolstoy's revelation not only transformed his personal outlook, it reshaped his entire worldview. His later works took on a different tone. Whereas earlier novels explored the complexities of human nature, his later writings sought to strip life down to its essence. He became deeply concerned with moral and spiritual questions, often clashing with the Russian Orthodox Church and the aristocracy as he championed simplicity, humility, and nonviolence. He renounced his wealth, dressed like a peasant, gave away much of his property, and lived modestly. He no longer believed in the power of institutions or governments to create a just world, only in the power of individuals to live with integrity and love. His final years were marked by a radical commitment to his newfound philosophy. He rejected the trappings of privilege and embraced the wisdom of the simple people he had once overlooked. And in doing so, he found something he had never known in all his years of success: peace. He no longer feared death, for he no longer saw himself as separate from life itself. He had let go of the illusion of control and embraced the truth that meaning was not something to be achieved, but something to be lived. Tolstoy's journey speaks to the deepest fears and longings of the human heart. In an age where we are told that meaning comes from personal success, recognition, or intellectual mastery, his story offers a different perspective. It suggests that perhaps meaning is not something to chase. Perhaps it is already here, waiting in the smallest, most ordinary moments of life, in the love we give, in the kindness we show, in the simple act of being present. Tolstoy's revelation was not the answer he had expected. It was not a grand philosophical theory or a secret formula for happiness. It was a truth so simple it had been overlooked. Life's meaning is not in what we think. It is in how we live.